This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
I want to welcome you to this Real Talk Roundtable. In just a moment, we're going to introduce you to 4 experts who are doing everything in their power to address a national disaster, to address something that has perhaps not been taken as seriously as it should, but it's an issue that's solvable. Would you believe that 300,000 Canadians are experiencing homelessness right now? Would you believe that in our home city alone, our home city of Edmonton, more than 300 people, nearly one per day, will die on the street? Today, we endeavor to figure out what we're doing wrong and what we can do right to address this crisis. First, I want to let you know that this episode is happening with the support of Rello, our presenting sponsor right here on Real Talk. And this is a quick message for those of you that are going to take this weekend or maybe this month to find a way to get out of that job you're stuck in and to find career satisfaction. You know, you can launch a rewarding career in real estate with Rello's affordable online courses that make it easy to pass your exam and get your license so you can set up your own business, set your own hours, and tap into that unlimited earning potential. Now, the reason why so many people are choosing Rello, that's R-E-L-O, is because the team there is committed to your success. They have instructors that run these online exam prep sessions every Saturday, plus a bunch of resources once your career is officially off the ground. The best news, because you're hearing about Rello on Real Talk right now, you can save 20% on any Rello course with the code REALTALK. That's all one word, REALTALK, when you get started today at Rello.ca. It was a huge honor to participate in the Chancellor's Forum on Sheltering the Truth. That went down at the University of Alberta less than 12 hours ago, and it was hosted by one of our guests who joins us in studio today. That's the Chancellor of the University of Alberta and a wonderful friend of this show, Peggy Garritty. It's so nice to see you here, Peggy. Thanks for making time for us.
Thanks, Ryan. Really happy to be here today.
We're joined by an internist and addiction specialist, Dr. Monty Ghosh. Thanks for making time for us, Doc. Nice to see you here. Jordan Reiniger is joining us. He's Executive Director of Boyle Street Community Services. You guys have been in the headlines. I think more people are aware now of what you're doing than ever before. Jordan, thanks for joining us in studio.
Thanks, my pleasure.
And when people are talking about those that are experiencing homelessness or houselessness in Canada, everybody knows the name Tim Richter. Tim is the Executive Director of the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, who's joining us from Calgary. Tim, you hit the road. You hit the QE2 right after that Chancellor's Forum last night. We appreciate you making time for us from your home this morning. Tim, I want to make sure I can hear you. Johnny, are we good to go? Do we have levels from Tim? You might be muted. Tim, you want to give us some audio here? Because I want you to lead us off this morning. You want to try again? How you doing? There you are. Yep. There's your voice. Tim, you delivered the keynote in front of a packed audience last night. It was live streaming as well. The link will be in our show notes for people that want to watch the event as it played out. But put this into perspective for us. Homelessness as a disaster in Canada.
Yeah, the mass homelessness that we're seeing today in Canada that you were describing earlier is on the scale that's bigger than Canada's largest natural disasters. So in terms of the loss of housing. So if you think about the flood in Calgary in 2013, about 77,000 households were forced out of their homes. The Fort McMurray wildfire in 2016, 75,000 people were forced out of their homes. Even Yellowknife, about 20,000 people. As you mentioned, over 300,000 people are expected to lose their housing over the course of this year in Canada. And when you think about that scale of the loss of housing, but also the economic impact, like homelessness costs the Canadian economy over $8 billion per year, at least. And it's also would be one of the top 10 most lethal disasters in Canadian history, if you stacked it up against some of the others. So, this is a massive tragedy, and it's a humanitarian disaster that's unfolding in our streets. But the good news is, unlike fires or floods, well, maybe fires, but unlike floods, this is preventable. This is preventable, and this is solvable.
One of the things that becomes apparent anytime somebody hears you talk about this, Tim, is when you invoke the word disaster, it gets people's attention. Maybe we've been using the wrong language, Jordan, when we talk about homelessness and when we talk about this bigger crisis. Maybe it just hasn't lit that fire under the public that it needs to.
Yeah, I mean, that's possible. I think we have been trying to articulate the situation on the ground for a long time, that it's getting worse and worse over time and not better since the pandemic in particular. The number of people who are dying and experiencing really severe outcomes is increasing steadily. The numbers just keep going up. 301 people in our city died last year, which is dramatically higher than any other year that we've ever experienced. And so things are moving in the wrong direction right now because we're not addressing the problem.
It might be a dumb question, but
Yeah.
what changed last year? Why dramatically higher last year?
It just has continued to grow and increase. And so part of it is the drug poisoning crisis that is in our city. Part of it is just the number of people that are out there on the street without the kind of supports that they would need to be able to sort of survive and live in a good way. And so there's a lot of challenges. And I think one of the challenges is it's been like a bit of a frog in boiling water, right? It's been getting worse. So if we took the situation on the ground today and we just transplanted it to 2019, people would see it as a disaster, but it's been steadily growing and getting worse and worse and worse over time. And so incrementally, it doesn't feel that much more significant. But if you compare today to 4 years ago, it's a dramatic difference.
Dr. Ghosh, are you seeing that? I mean, we should note that you're an assistant professor, University of Alberta. You work out of Calgary as well. You're obviously a medical doctor, but you do a lot of work as well in frontline services, drop-in centers and the like. When Jordan talks about this exponential increase, not in a good way, and the numbers are up in the worst kind of a way, you must see that firsthand all the time.
100%. So we're seeing huge increases in people dying because of the opioid epidemic, but also because of exposure. So while they're outside, they're exposed to cold weather. We see a lot of frostbites, but we're also seeing a lot of burns, interestingly enough, from encampments. We've seen over a 3-time increase in the number of people being admitted to burn units in this province this past year for people experiencing homelessness than we've ever seen before. And that's huge. And we know that homelessness is a health issue. I mean, I come at it from a very biased lens, of course, coming at it from a physician's lens. But if you're an individual experiencing homelessness and you're on the streets, your mortality is 10 times that higher than someone who's stably housed. If you're in a shelter, it's 3 times that of someone who's stably housed. Those are high risks, higher than cardiac arrest, higher than cancer. So why aren't we treating it as such?
Can you repeat what you told us last night at the Chancellor's Forum about life expectancy? That stopped me in my tracks.
Yeah, I find when I first heard that, it blew my mind. But the average life expectancy for a Canadian is 82, somewhere between 78 and 82. I mean, it shifts from year to year, of course. It's dropping because of the opioid epidemic. But for someone experiencing homelessness, the life expectancy, if they're female, is between the ages of 30 and 35. And if they're male, it's between 40 and 45. And it's such a loss for human life. And when you look at those numbers and the life expectancy, I don't understand why we're not doing more to address it. It's a huge public health issue.
Life expectancy of 30 to 35, like Peggy, I don't know about you, Chancellor Garritty, but that to me, that forces a moment of reflection. You look at jurisdictions around the world, people living in the worst kind of poverty with zero access to any sort of medical resource, and life expectancy is right around that same number. So what does that say about how we're treating that element of our population, our fellow human beings, as someone said last night at the forum, our brothers and sisters, right? I mean, the Chancellor of a university like the University of Alberta, one of Canada's leading institutions, you had a choice on what you wanted the theme of your forum to be. Well, why did you select this one? Why was this so important to you personally as the Chancellor?
It's, I think I'm like a regular community member. I'm watching and I'm seeing these kinds of things happening in the community, and then get challenged about what the university was doing, what the university's involvement would be. And you said at the beginning that these are 4 experts. I am not an expert in this at all, never intended to set out this way. But as I learned more and talked to people who are experts about this, just hearing the words, hearing those statistics, excuse me, excuse me, hearing the stories, seeing the people. I visited one of the encampments, listening to them, listening to these people that are here today, and thinking this is a disaster. But also, it is, as we heard last night, it is solvable. And that's the thing I think that is so important, to get that message out, that we can solve this, that there are ways of solving it. We know what the solutions are. That makes it a little bit more frustrating that we're actually not doing those things.
Right.
But the fact, I think some people in the community just feel like it's hopeless, that we just don't know where to start, we don't know where to turn, we don't know what we should be doing. And so my reason for having that forum last night was just to shine a spotlight on this, on the issue, and to get other people to hear from people like Jordan and Monty and Tim about what's really happening and the kinds of things that we can do to solve it and address the problem.
I want to give a shout out to our live audience here tuning in on YouTube, participating in the chat. Tony, for example, she says, I know that housing is a provincial jurisdiction. More on that, Tony, in just a sec, because it kind of is, but it kind of isn't. Says, but there have to be avenues that the city can take, and not just giving away land to developers like Candy. Developers do have to play a role. Maybe we'll get into that today as well. 80s Fanify says, I read a quote recently that said something like, we are all closer to being houseless than being millionaires. And that's really stuck with me. I don't know about you. I'm way closer to being houseless than being a millionaire. I'm not trying to be funny at all. Tracy says we need to start focusing on root causes instead of focusing on reaction 100% of the time. Tracy goes on to say disasters are preventable, but there are a range of sacrifices that must be made to prevent them. Are individuals, families, and society prepared? A lot of our audience members responding to the numbers that you just dropped on us, Doctor, as well, around life expectancy. And then, Tim, there's some comments in the chat as well. People are saying, this is a choice. This is a choice. You talked about that in a big way.
Yeah, well, it is a choice, but perhaps not the way some folks are thinking about it. Homelessness, we were talking about it last night, homelessness is a housing problem. It's not caused by addiction. It's not caused by mental illness. It's not caused by personal fault or failing. When you study the data, there was a really good study that I talked about last night in a book called Homelessness is a Housing Problem by a guy named Greg Colburn from Washington State. But he looked all over the United States. And he looked at different cities, and he compared, all of these different cities and tried to figure out who has the higher rates of homelessness and who has lower rates of homelessness, and why is there a difference. And when he looked, it wasn't due to addiction. So he looked at, like, West Virginia, for example. The United States has the highest rates of addiction in the United States, but one of the lowest rates of homelessness. He looked at weather, when you compared, say, cities in California with, like, Boston or New York, that didn't explain the rate of homelessness. Mental illness, similarly. Poverty rates, surprisingly, he looked at something like Detroit, for example, who has fairly high rates of poverty but relatively low rates of homelessness. He said, but what they concluded was that the thing that explains increased rates of homelessness is housing and the housing market. And so when you look even at Edmonton, you can see that how this is playing out. So between 2009 and 2019, the city of Edmonton reduced overall homelessness by about 43%, right? That is the largest reduction in homelessness of any major city in Canada, right? Any major city. And you hit 2019 and then the pandemic in 2020. And what we saw was a huge increase, beginning an increase in population, increase in rent, decrease in vacancy, and a significant increase in homelessness. So homelessness in Edmonton between 2019 and 2024 has gone up 43%, right? And a lot of that is down to the pandemic, high cost of rent, low vacancy, right? And I think it's really, really, really important that we understand that homelessness is a housing problem. Because if we attribute homelessness to some individual fault or failing, then we go down a path of solution that's ineffective. We blame people. We blame people for what's happened to them. And that's just not right? This is a structural problem. It's caused by housing, the lack of housing, specifically the lack of rental and affordable rental housing.
Jordan, what is the story of Edmonton's encampments done, do you think, from a high-profile nature, from a front-page news type of a situation, to advance conversations and, most importantly, action on this file? Has it actually accomplished anything? What have you seen with public sentiment, with political action over the past few months?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been obviously probably the biggest story in our city for the last couple of months. I think that it has evoked action. I think the worrying thing is that action, in my opinion, hasn't always been the right response to what has been seen on the ground. I think it has done what Peggy has talked about, and I think a lot of people are coming away from this saying it's so complicated, there's no solutions to this. And I think that is a sort of a tragedy. I think Edmontonians do care. I think when I talk to people, they do really care about the issues. They care about people who are living on the street. I think there's just a bit of hopelessness about, well, what's the solution? And I think in the vacuum of solutions being presented, then people make up their own minds and other narratives can take forward. And I want to just sort of say what Monty talked about, pick that up, about it being healthcare related issue. And what Tim was saying about being a housing issue, and primarily since the pandemic, we have talked about it as a public safety issue. And we have equated people who are in the most vulnerable state as being safety threats, as opposed to people who need our care and need our support. And I think when the lens that you look at a problem matters. And when you're looking at it as a public safety problem, then you're going to have a public safety response, which is what we have had to the encampment problem. It is the police taking the lead on a very sad and very complex social issue, and that is probably not the most appropriate group to be doing that.
Huh. That's Jordan Reiniger with Boyle Street Community Services. The Real Talk Roundtable. Basically, I like how Tim's putting it. We're addressing one of the biggest disasters that our nation is grappling with right now. By the numbers, you cannot deny it. So why has our response not matched? It's not like we're not spending on it. And by we, I'm talking about the collective, the taxpayers, as we say. It's not like governments aren't dumping money at this, but is the money going in the right spot? Is it intuitive and informed expenditure or investment? I guess that's where we'll go in just a quick second. Back to the live chat as well to get your take on this. You're watching either live right now on YouTube, on Real Talk, listening live maybe on the Mixler audio app presented by our friends at California Closets, who do want to give you that quick heads up. If your plan is to invest in your home right now on the organizational front, you've promised yourself you're going to declutter. You got to finally make good on that plan to convert the home office to the spare bedroom, or the spare bedroom to the home office, get the storage room under control, finally get that entertainment unit installed. You just need a prompt. Here it is. You can get your free consultation today by visiting californiaclosets.ca. Nobody touches. They're experts, experienced perspective, and of course their talented team of installers as well. We recommend that you take your business to California Closets. It's Heart Month at Friesen Brothers. They're proud to be supporting the Mazankowski Alberta Heart Institute. And of course, that also means good news for Friesen Brothers customers in 16 different Alberta locations. You can learn more on their website at friesen.com on what they're doing for Heart Month. The Red Seal chefs have some great meals in store for you, awesome recipe ideas. As a matter of fact, through the month of February, you can check out their latest flyer. A lot of the heart-healthy options are clearly marked as such in store. So you can eat healthy, you can feed your family meals you know they're going to love, and of course at Friesen Brothers, they're always looking for ways to ensure that that food is affordable for families across the province. Friesen Brothers is Alberta-grown and Alberta-owned. A shout out to those of you that are either underemployed or unemployed right now. You know you've got the work ethic. You're not sure if you've got the necessary experience, but you know you'd love to be part of the green energy movement in Canada. Kubi Renewable Energy is hiring people of all levels of experience, from apprentices all the way up to journeyperson electricians, from sales personnel to HR personnel, office managers, you name it. Kubi would love to add you to their team. If you're big on getting Canada serious about solar, they're hiring for locations in Lethbridge, Kamloops, Edmonton, Calgary, and beyond. You can check out the careers link at kubienergy.ca. And the same thing goes for our friends at Apex Automation. I know that this podcast is going to find some engineers, and we're talking to the engineers that you know you're good at what you do, but you don't feel like your employer's meeting you there. You don't feel like you're hitting your true potential. Apex Automation wants to talk to you. They're building a culture at Apex where amazing people like you can do their best work. If you're ready to grow your career, challenge yourself, learn new skills, you've come to the right place. Learn more about what they're automating in BC, at the ports, in Alberta, on those pipelines, in Saskatchewan, in the potash industry, plus robotics, conveyor belts, overhead cranes, and more. The future is bright when you take your next step with a career move at apexautomation.ca. We talk a lot about money. We talk a lot about funding. And when you talk to politicians about things like homelessness in Canada, you know that a lot of times the bucks get passed, don't they? Municipalities say we're not getting enough support from the province. There's not enough support from the feds. The province says it's Ottawa's job. Ottawa says that this is the province's job. And at the end of the day, we wonder what's actually getting done. So why don't we talk about where intuitive investments need to go? Dr. Ghosh, I want to talk to you about the front lines in just a quick second. But Tim, why don't you tee this up for us? What are the boneheaded funding decisions you've seen, and what are the really smart ones?
Well, first of all, I'll say the boneheaded one is that we allow people experiencing homelessness to be pushed around very expensive public systems, right? So if you're experiencing homelessness in Edmonton today, for example, you're in an encampment, you are going to be pushed into the healthcare system. Monty will tell you it costs $1,000 to keep a person per night in the hospital. Then you may end up in remand center, $88,000 a year, right? $300 and something a night. And then you might get arrested again. You're going to go to a shelter, and around you go, right? And that is not solving the problem, right? You even talk about the response to encampments. Having police respond with enforcement to encampments is simply pushing the problem around. Imagine squeezing one end of a water balloon, right? You're just pushing the problem somewhere else and propelling it into this very expensive public system, not solving the problem. You know, you can spend upwards of $230,000 to $250,000 per person per year on not solving homelessness, right? You know, and for the cost of remand, you could put somebody up in the Fairmont, right?
When you put that into perspective, $1,000 a day, Tim, it's tough to wrap your mind around.
Exactly, right? So we know that you can take someone. So Edmonton has housed about 16,000 people directly off the streets, out of shelter since 2009, right? For the people with the most acute needs, we know that they can be housed and supported for anything, but like people with complex needs, active addiction, mental health problems, right? They can be housed for about 16 to 20 to maybe perhaps $35,000 per person per year, depending on the level of care that they need in the community, in a Housing First program, right? So compare $35,000 a year for somebody with complex needs per person per year with, you know, $100,000, $200,000 per person per year. It is far cheaper to solve this problem than it is to ignore it.
Peggy, one of the interesting things I noticed at your forum last night with the audience engagement, and it was a packed house. You know, I don't know, it seemed like a couple hundred people in there at least. And that question, people saying, "What can we do?" Like it was engaged citizens there that are not content with status quo. They're not obviously able to sort of just accept the current situation. And then there were some great questions as well, like what can post-secondary institutions do? What can people in positions of leadership do? What did you take away from all that? Because the average person's going to listen to this and go, well, I mean, I don't work for a housing agency. I don't work at law enforcement, health provider, but that doesn't mean they don't care.
Yeah, I think it's a frustration that people have because they really do want to do something. I think, as Jordan said, people in Edmonton care. I absolutely believe that. And I think they just don't know where to turn. And so I think that's, again, one of the reasons why for having the forum and thankfully conversations like this one this morning is for people to understand that there are solutions. I know that it's not within their power necessarily to make those solutions happen, but they have voices. I think Tim mentioned last night at the end of our session that people that are homeless are often voiceless. They don't have a voice. They need people to express their voices on their behalf. And so I think that's one of the things that people can do. They can talk to they can talk to their city councilors, they can talk to their MLAs, they can talk to their federal politicians and say, this is a disaster and we expect to see results and we expect things to happen. I think that's what gives you hope. It's not going to be quick, but I think there is hope. There are ways, as we've talked about, that this issue can be addressed, that we can make progress, and I think the leaders at all levels in our community just need to hear from regular community members that they care about this and they expect things to be done.
I agree with you. And one of the things that I'm having a really hard time wrapping my mind around is experts like those that are joining us on this panel today. Like Tim, you're just talking about, a drop of 43% in the city of Edmonton, and then that momentum just kind of stopped. And one of the things that I've kind of been wrestling with, in particular since the Chancellor's Forum, is that we understand that what we need to do, we have done it. It worked, and then for whatever reason, we stopped doing it. And I'll be honest, I'm one of the many, many people that's a bit of a local reference here for our audience, but former Edmonton Mayor Stephen Mandel, I remember he rolled out, he said there's going to be a 10-year plan to end homelessness. And then to be honest, because I'm a little bit lazy, like everybody else, and there's a lot of things competing for our attention, time went on and years ticked by, and I still see people experiencing homelessness. And so I guess I had kind of resolved, Tim, that Mayor Mandel's plan was just a failure. And probably bigger picture, you look at it and say, I guess that homelessness can't be solved. Yet here you are saying that it is, and that we've proven that it can be. So how is the average person supposed to wrap their mind around that? We know how to do it. We're just not.
Yeah. Well, and again, this is really a matter of political will. When that plan was released, Edmonton set about one of the nation leading responses to homelessness. It had a lot of success. Now, the challenge was the province was engaged under Premier Stelmach and committed to ending homelessness. The city was engaged. You were making progress, but the federal government was AWOL. And as we know, homelessness is a housing problem, and you need the resources and the jurisdiction of the federal government to get engaged and build housing. Modern mass homelessness, like we see today, began in the 1980s. Do you know most of Canada's purpose-built rental was built before 1980? Because the federal government subsidized the construction of rental housing and built lots of affordable housing. Right. And so in the absence of federal government engagement and that focus on building rental housing, we had this explosion of homelessness. So while Edmonton housed 16,000 people, there were a whole bunch of more people becoming homeless, but especially since the beginning of the pandemic. And as Monty talked about last night, at the beginning of the pandemic, we took people out of jail really quickly, sent them right into the homeless shelters. We saw people losing their housing. We saw people having to be moved out of shelter into shelter hotels or other arrangements to allow social distancing, right? So many people decided to be outside because they were worried about getting sick in the shelter, and they don't particularly like being in shelter in the first place, right? And then you have population growth, huge amounts of population growth. Again, federal jurisdiction, right? We had a huge surge in population growth across Canada in the last couple of years. All of these things contribute to this homelessness. But again, we know what to do. And I imagine if, you've got 100,000 people that'll tune into your podcast, right? Or more. I don't know. I'm assuming that at least maybe 1 million. Who knows? But imagine if at least, right? Imagine if every one of your listeners today took one action, right? I can send you a link, and we're trying to push the federal government to invest in housing, right? Took one action, click that link, sent a letter to the Prime Minister, Minister Freeland and Minister Fraser and said, we need this to be the housing budget. We need you to invest in rental housing, right? And then they did the same thing with the province. I promise you that would get attention, right? We really need, as Ralph Klein's Martha and Henry. We need Martha and Henry to say to the provincial government, to say to the federal government, to say to our city governments, you know what? This is a solvable problem. We need you to prioritize it. We need you to fix the housing system, and we need you to solve homelessness. And you know what? They would.
Dr. Ghosh, there's an interesting comment here on the chat. I want to put this in front of you. I want you to talk to us about the human beings that you interact with, the people. Let's remind ourselves, right? I was corrected by a young person a short time ago that wrote into the show, actually, a high school student that listens to Real Talk. And I had, in a throwaway comment, had talked about the homeless. And they said, we've altered our language. I know people are talking about houselessness as well. But this young person said, we talk about people experiencing homelessness. We remind ourselves in the language we use that these are people that are experiencing something, that their circumstance does not define who they are. I'm not going to pile on an audience member, but I'm referencing a comment. Alberta Girl says, the homeless that we took in over the years were either addicted and wanted to continue with the booze or drugs, or they simply did not want to work and have to pay rent. And all of them had access to supports. They just were not interested. That from Alberta Girl. Tell us about the people that you work with and work for every day.
So I think one of our biggest problems as society is we victimize individuals experiencing homelessness. We consider them a problem. We consider them individuals who have made choices that got them into that situation. They are victims, but they're victims of society, in my mind. And we know this from adverse childhood experiences, this concept of adverse childhood experiences. So there was a study that was done back in the 90s, Caso Permanente in California, where they looked at the 10 top sort of traumas that people face in their youth. And they looked forward and saw what their health outcomes were and the personal outcomes were later on in life. And they found that if you had 4 or more of these 10 adverse childhood experiences, this included emotional, sexual, physical trauma, emotional, physical neglect, and structural issues within the family, such as divorce, having a parent who had a mental health issue. You were at a higher risk, sometimes even 10 times of a higher risk of having substance use issue, but also being and experiencing homelessness. And so that's huge. And if we look at these individuals through that lens, that they've experienced trauma in their lives, they've been neglected, they've faced structural racism and other aspects of society that have really marginalized them, you can understand why they got to where they're at. And I think that's the thing that we fail to recognize when we deal with this population is we tend to say that they don't want to engage with us, they don't want to access resources, they have substance use issues. But in reality, a lot of times they don't want to engage in resources because they mistrust the system. They've been mistreated since they were a child with the system. They don't feel that the system can help them necessarily. And it's up to us to build that relationship up again. It's up to us to form that relationship of trust. And that takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. I think a lot of us have issues with trust. And if you can imagine, if you've been sexually assaulted, if you've been racially discriminated against, and you've been pushed to the margins of society, it would be very hard to engage and very hard to sort of reintroduce yourself and sort of to work with others. Right? It's incredibly hard.
Yeah. Jump in on that too, because I think one of the things that people don't realize is people have actually tried a lot of the systems already, and they haven't worked for them, right? So they've tried to go into some form of treatment center, but a 24-day, 28-day treatment for somebody with a really abstinence-based treatment, somebody with a complex opioid addiction is doomed for failure. And even if it worked, they get discharged back into homelessness. And so there's a lot of people out there who have tried multiple times, but are saying now, well, why would I try again, right? The other factor that I think is a horrifying one is that a lot of people, because of the way that they've been treated, because of their background, I would say one of the number one issues is shame. Is that people feel a deep sense of shame and don't feel like that's actually they're worth the effort to move forward. And I think when you have, this is why sometimes the political conversation around people being safety threats and being issues. This is why it's so toxic and so dangerous, is because it's reinforcing the shame narrative that people feel around themselves and around how they've been treated, and whether they're even worthy of moving forward. And I think how we do this and how we solve these challenges matter. And to Monty's point, are we doing things that are building that trust back up again? Or are we doing things that break that trust down again and reinforce those narratives? And I think that, for me, that's the tragedy in this encampment response we've had, is it's breaking that trust down, it's reinforcing those narratives, it's treating people like criminals, and piling on that shame that people often already feel.
Okay, let me throw this feedback into the chat and then right over to you, Tim. Erica in the live chat says, I don't really like the blame the police sentiment. They would rather be doing pretty much anything else than going to these encampments, but nearby residents need their safety concerns addressed as well. Tim, what would you say to Erica? And in response to Jordan?
Hey, I totally agree. Like I come from a family of police officers, right? My sister, my dad, my uncles and cousins, like I've been around police officers my whole life, and I promise you that most of the officers that I've ever met would rather be doing much more valuable work, solving crime, not punishing the victims with encampment suites, right? And there are much better responses, right? There are more effective responses to encampments. But I want to jump on a point that Jordan and Monty were making so well, right? Like, I really want to emphasize, like, at the root of most, if not all, addiction is pain, right? And if we think about the cause of homelessness is a lack of housing, and we recognize that it's not caused by individual circumstance, and I encourage people, imagine your worst day. Imagine if you were feeling intense physical pain all the time. Imagine if you couldn't sleep. Imagine if you were dealing with the trauma of losing your children to care, or childhood abuse, or simply being treated like dirt on the street, right? These are people in pain. And you don't treat people in pain with enforcement, right? And I don't think the police want to do that either, right? Like, the vast majority of police officers are good people. They don't want to be doing this. And there are more effective responses. The problem is this issue has been politicized. There are people exploiting the community fears, and justifiable community fears, to be honest. Like, people are concerned when they see open drug use or they see encampments, and that's understandable. But the response, the more effective response, is to have a conversation. When you think about people are choosing to live in encampments, well, who would choose to live outside in Edmonton when it's 40 below, right? What's choices between options? What's so bad about option B being option A being a shelter or something else, that option B, the encampment's the better choice? You want to solve an encampment, you sit down with the people in them, understand, what they needed, find out a little bit about them and their history. Ask them, how can we help you? And I guarantee you, if you said, could we interest you in housing that, meet your needs, where we don't want to force you to go to church, we don't want to force you don't necessarily have to stop drinking or using, but we can support you and then get you on a path to recovery. Like, if we give them a better option, 99.9% of the time they're going to choose it. And the only reason they won't is, getting back to what Monty says, they don't trust us because they've been burned by the system over and over again.
I know I'm not the first to say this, but it's never lost on me that, a lot of folks' reaction is, someone on the street has got their palm out, they're hoping for a toonie or a five. And, oftentimes I think maybe to get out of giving, the people say, well, they'll whisper to their young child, they're just going to go spend it on drugs and booze. And then that person will walk past the individual into Rogers Place and spend $90 on booze as they watch the Oilers play, crushing edibles and mushrooms and enjoying their drug of choice, right? They're just going to spend the money on booze. Yeah, just like the rest of us do. We become so obsessed with you've got to be here. You've got to be at this point in your sobriety, or you got to have this figured out before we can get a roof over your head, which just is so counterintuitive. It just doesn't make sense. Why is it? I guess we just are so pious. We got to have the moral high ground. We like to feel like we've got it figured out when other people haven't, Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was mentioned a little bit last night. This difference between perceptions of safety and discomfort, and I think a lot of people feel very uncomfortable, whether consciously or subconsciously, that in our community there are people who are in such desperate poverty that they're sitting there begging for money. And I think we then go to the place as humans as moralizing, well, the reason they're there, they must have done something wrong to be there. And I think the one important thing that we can all do as citizens is, in those moments, whether you give money or not, the important thing is to acknowledge the humanity of that individual, because 99 of 100 people will completely ignore the person or make disparaging comments. And I think what we've created in our community, because we've scapegoated, if we're honest, people experiencing homelessness as the reason why our downtown hasn't recovered.
Right.
When it's much broader than that, obviously. We've created this real animosity in our community. And people who are experiencing homelessness feel that. And so I think that one thing that people can do, in addition to using their voices, is just show kindness and acknowledge the humanity of the people that they're seeing, who are often sort of pushed aside and treated like trespassers in their own community. And I think that, so give money, don't give money, that's up to you, but acknowledge the humanity and look them in the eye and say hello and smile, because chances are the last 10 interactions have not been good.
Aaron in our chat says, instead of fear, next time you're headed downtown, why not fill your backpack with granola bars and juice boxes? Kimberly says, I know an addict who is so deeply loved by a huge community, he's chosen to live on the streets and continue with his addiction because of his internal demons. He doesn't think he deserves better. I want to ask all four of you about the youth, young people. A friend of mine who was in attendance last night, I'm sure she wouldn't mind me invoking her name, Margot Long, with Youth Empowerment and Support Services. She came up to me. No host wants this feedback, but we also want it. We invite it. She came up to me and she said, you missed an important angle. She said, we didn't spend much time talking about young people. And there's a comment here that I think will tee this up, and then I want to go to all four of you on this. But people are asking here, gosh, I can't find the live chat's going nuts this morning, which is absolutely fantastic. Everybody's contributing, everybody's sharing. There was someone in the live chat that said, can we talk about the demographics? Can we talk about who's most likely to wind up in this situation? Is it Indigenous people in Canada? Is it the LGBTQ2S plus population? Is it people that have experienced sexual or physical assault as children? I know all of you will have insights on this. Tim, do you want to start the conversation here in the context of young people and demographic?
Yeah, well, young people are, especially young people that are in the LGBTQ2S community, are at higher risk of homelessness if they have some, especially if they have conflict with their family, or importantly, if they're involved in the child welfare system. The child welfare system in Canada is a super highway into homelessness. It will literally project kids directly from care into the streets. And, I think we should think about kids in care in Alberta a little bit differently. When a child is taken from their parents and brought into care, they become our children, right? They are wards of the state. They're wards of the province of Alberta. They are our children. So we have a responsibility to ensure that they, are safe, they're healthy, they get a good education, they have friends, and they have stable housing when they leave. They're our kids, and we should do for them what every parent would do for them, right? You talk about Indigenous people, right? We know that Indigenous men are 11 times more likely to be in a homeless shelter in Canada than non-Indigenous men. Indigenous women are 15 times more likely to be in a homeless shelter than non-Indigenous women. We also know that women are significantly underrepresented in homeless statistics because they experience homelessness invisibly. They will do everything they can to avoid a homeless shelter that is incredibly unsafe to them, or living in encampments, which is also incredibly unsafe. So they end up and, can often get trapped in sex trafficking. They get engaged in survival sex. They'd rather find a boyfriend or something to stay off of the streets in an unhealthy relationship than go into the streets. But one of the things that we we don't often talk about, and Monty could probably shed a bit more light on this, is the prevalence of people with brain injury and developmental disability. So people, that to me is one of the things we don't often talk about in homelessness. But I think you would see, if you were able to examine them, people have brain injuries either acquired while they were homeless from violence, or related to addiction or other things, concussion, things like that, or people with developmental disability, people experiencing autism or things like that. Right. It's really a mix. And I think what you see, what meets the eye, isn't what's actually there, because the vast majority of people who experience homelessness are in and out in like a day or 2 days or a week. Right. But there's a group of people that end up getting stuck for long periods of time.
Dr. Ghosh, when we talk about the youth angle in this conversation, how does that resonate with you, with what you do as an addiction specialist?
So I don't see as many youth as I think that I should, that they tend to be within the healthcare system. 17 or below goes to usually to pediatrics, 17 or above comes to adults.
Right.
I usually see just the adults. I do see youth every now and then. But I think to Tim's point, and the thing that I think that really we need to highlight is that it's not just youth, it's anybody who's transitioning. And by transitioning, they're moving from one service to another, whether they're going from the welfare system, from the youth welfare system, if they're in the foster care, moving out of the foster care system, if they're going from corrections to the community, if they're leaving hospital to the community. I think that's one of the big things that I see often, is this sort of transitions piece as to who gets affected. And I think we need to do better from that perspective. Like, I think from a healthcare lens, we need to be better at helping people transition from whatever that transition may be. But yes, youth is a huge issue. We do see a lot of youth who are experiencing homelessness. They don't have the same needs necessarily as people who are adults. It's a very tailored population that we need to focus on, but we need to have very specific solutions for them that are very different than the rest of the population. A lot of them don't have substance use concerns in comparison to adult populations. Or yet. And
at the same time, to state the obvious, like homelessness may be a housing problem, but like youth experiencing homelessness are not necessarily 100% there just because they don't have a house. There's other factors. Can we all acknowledge that? I mean, that seems to be obvious.
100%.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ryan, and I talked with Margot last night as well.
Oh,
She's a
did you?
good friend. And I think that warrants a discussion all on its own, because from what she was saying, it's very challenging right now for the services that they provide. And I think also if Cheryl Whiskey Jack was here, she would remind us as well about the problems with the child welfare system, especially for Indigenous young people. So there's lots to dig in there as well that contribute to this overall challenge for sure.
Yeah, Jordan, how about you? Like, is it the same sort of a situation like what Dr. Ghosh just told us? Like at Boyle Street is yes. Managing more of the youth homeless population, Boyle Street more the adult. How does it work? Can you explain for us?
Actually, I'll talk about there's something called the Youth Agency Collaborative. So one of the things we hear so much in our in all of the discourse is that people need to collaborate more. Well, the agencies within Edmonton collaborate in an incredible amount, and it's oftentimes that the decision makers don't want to listen to what the collaborations have to say. But the Youth Agency Collaborative is 26 agencies. Yes is part of that. Boyle Street is part of that. A bunch of other agencies serving youth in our community. But just to give you a sense of the numbers, all of those 26 agencies looked at who we were serving that were either experiencing homelessness or right on the edge, couch surfing, that sort of thing. Right. And there were over 2,000 youth in our city.
Jeez.
And so this is the group, and Margot has been a fierce advocate for this, but this is the group that unless we get a handle on this, that they're transitioning into adult homelessness. And the child welfare system, to Tim's point, to what Cheryl would say, is the biggest feeder of those youth coming in. Some stats that we have are over 50% of our youth who are experiencing homelessness are from the 2S LGBTQ plus community. And so that's a huge issue where we're still sort of youth are kind of trying to find a place where they belong, who identify with that community, because there's too many places still that they don't feel safe and don't feel welcome. And there are some unique needs. There are different sort of responses that are required to support youth. And so it does require its own conversation, its own sort of plan. because unless we do that, we're just going to have people coming.
I want to give a shout out to our audience today that's in the live chat. Cassandra and others have reminded me that when I just talked about demographics, I didn't even mention people with disabilities, which is obviously a huge part of the population as well. Tim, can I ask you to repeat just that bit of your, you know what I'm talking about, the anecdote about musical chairs? I know that this audience would appreciate that because that one really resonated with me. Tell us about, was it Susie? Who is it, Susie?
It was Alice.
Alice, right.
Alice, yeah. So imagine when I try and describe homelessness and why homelessness is a housing problem, I often use the analogy of musical chairs, right? So if you imagine a game of musical chairs, you've got 10 kids and 10 chairs. And there's in among the 10 kids, there's a girl named Alice, and Alice has twisted her ankle and she's on crutches, right? So in that game, the first round, the music starts, all the kids sort of run around and the music stops and they sit down because they haven't taken away a chair yet, right? Now the music starts again, the kids start moving, they take away a chair. The music stops, all the kids sit down except Alice. Now, if you asked Alice, why she isn't, why she lost the game, right? She'd probably tell you, well, I lost because I'm in crutches and I just couldn't get around to the chair fast enough, right? But did Alice lose the game because of her sore ankle, or did she lose because there aren't enough chairs, right? Chairlessness is the ultimate outcome of this game, just like homelessness is the ultimate outcome of a lack of affordable and rental housing, right? And when there is low vacancy and high cost rent, there's a lot of people that just can't compete in that market. They can't afford to pay the increased prices. They get turned away by landlords who can be more picky. I talked to an Indigenous woman this week who, went in Ontario, went to an open house showing and was lined up with everybody else to get into an apartment viewing. And as soon as she got to the front of the line, was told, oh no, it's the apartment's been rented. Clearly not true, right? So, homelessness is a housing problem. And like musical chairs, there's people, as chairs are taken away, as there's fewer and fewer homes, just won't be able to secure housing.
I appreciate you sharing that, Doc. You look like you've got something to say here.
Absolutely. So the disability piece is huge on my mind. And I work as a physician at the University of Alberta Hospital. I see patients coming in all the time. I've had traumatic brain injuries. They've had car accidents. They come in, they get admitted to hospital. We take care of them. We send them to long-term care. We don't push them onto the streets after the rehabilitation. And often they cannot function anymore in proper society. They can't work, etc. I want people to dwell on this thought. We have studies and a group of studies, they call them a systematic review, in which we pull together studies from all around the world and we analyze the study, right? And we come up with some sort of consensus around these studies. And what we've seen is that 50% of the population who experiences homelessness has had moderate to severe brain trauma. They have cognitive decline because of that. They have disabilities secondary to that. And yet we keep them on the street. We don't provide them housing. We don't provide them support. Housing is a human right, and people who have disabilities need to be prioritized for housing. We do that in the hospital. We do that for well-established individuals who come in, again, with traumatic brain injuries from car accidents or whatnot. Why can't we do the same for this population?
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, I think one of the biggest challenges is stigma. We are so obsessed with this narrative that the reason people are homeless is because of addictions, that when they present even to healthcare providers with traumatic brain injury, which is actually what's causing a lot of the challenges that they're facing, and that 50% number is, from what we see in the work that we do, is I think very accurate. They are presenting with a lot of challenges, but all that is seen is addiction. And so people say, well, we can't solve those problems because there's this addiction issue, or they're not even seeing the problem because of the addiction issues, but it's what's underlying. And the addiction is actually because people are self-medicating to deal with not having proper health care. And so it's a huge challenge. And then once people are on the street, the traumatic brain injury may have been a reason that they ended up there, but often it also sort of gets compounded because of sort of the experience of being on the street. And so, but that stigma around addiction, our obsession with addiction being the main issue of homelessness, creates all sorts of other problems where people don't actually get the care that they need.
Absolutely. And that stigma weighs heavy on us. I mean, as physicians, we do it all the time to this population. We see them in the hospital, in the emergency department, and we just ignore them. Or we say it's another person who's coming, who's drunk, get them out. We don't actually take time to understand where they come from, who they are as an individual. And that weighs again on that stigma piece. And I mean, Jordan, you were talking about something earlier that I really wanted to touch on as well, is that safety issue, the public safety issue. And I think the way we need to reframe it is it's not a public safety issue. It's a safety for these individuals. It's a safety issue for those individuals who are experiencing homelessness. And a lot of times people are using drugs to stay safe. We see this all the time. People are using crystal meth to stay awake all night because they can't sleep because they're afraid of being sexually assaulted or physically assaulted or having their stuff stolen. That is why they're using substances often, is to stay safe. And I think we need to acknowledge that. Like, housing helps provide them with that sense of safety. It helps provide them with that wellness piece that they need to actually reduce their substance use issues and concerns. So one of my favorite questions to ask my students is if there's like one health intervention you can do for someone who has really bad diabetes, really bad hypertension, has bad substance use issues, and is experiencing homelessness, what is it? And they'll often say, we need to get them on these meds, or we need to get them on insulin. The number one answer is getting them housing. That would be the biggest health impact ever. Exactly.
Sleep. One of the, in addition to, what's often being presented as maybe even being intoxicated, is days and days without having a proper sleep. Months, years sometimes without having a proper sleep. So even if you're accessing the shelter, you're in a massive room with 300 other people. It's loud, it's noisy. You're not going to get a good sleep. Lots of people will walk around, like you said, try and stay awake during the night so that they can stay safe. And then just try and find a table or some place to crash during the day to get as much sleep as they can. And in the environment that we are in today, there is very few places for people to go where they can sit down, they can have a sleep, they can do that sort of thing. And so I think the issue of lack of sleep, and if anybody out there has ever been a parent or dealt with insomnia or anything like that, you don't function very well when you don't have good sleep. And there's chronic sleeplessness in the population that is also leading to a lot of the health challenges that people are facing. And then when you have that, also when you take a substance, you react differently, right? The setting that you are in plays a big role in how you react to a substance. And so that's why, it would be very different if somebody was even stably housed. The way that they would react to a substance, because they have a sleep, they feel secure, they'll react to a substance in a very different way than if they're on the street trying to be safe, all that sort of thing.
No, absolutely. Psychosis, which we often are afraid of on the streets when people are talking to themselves and wandering around. That's because of a lack of sleep and the substance use combined. If we provided them sleep, their risk of psychosis decreases drastically. Sleep is a key way that we manage psychosis. And yet we're not providing them with that opportunity for the safety sense to have a good rest.
CeeLo on the chat says a sober single dad recently became homeless due to divorce. There are many ways that this can happen. If you're listening to this in the 48 hours after we're doing this, make sure you watch it on YouTube. I appreciate there's someone in there by the name of Quinn as well who's just dropping stats and facts, and I'm so grateful for that. The conversation that this is prompting is so very valuable. And we knew time would fly, and indeed it has. But we do have a bit of a tradition here on our Real Talk Roundtables on the Fridays, and that we want to give each panelist an opportunity to sort of tie it up with a bow for now, to make sure that nothing gets left undiscussed, or to give this audience something to chew on, something to digest over the next little bit, maybe a closing statement, if you will. Dr. Ghosh, you want to go first? What's one thing you want this audience thinking about over the next few days?
Is to understand these individuals as people and look at them as someone who's experienced trauma and is a victim of society. And that way you can develop empathy for this population, show compassion. That's what we need for this population, is compassion.
I like that. Chancellor Garritty.
Absolutely agree. And I think, Jordan, you used the word last night, kindness. I think that's, I think kindness, if you can combine that, it's hard to find these days, but hope. When I first heard there are solutions to this, we know that there are solutions. I think we just need to keep pressing, keep our eyes on this and our voices loud, and believe that this can be addressed. We've done it before.
Jordan.
Yeah, I'd say, like everybody said, there are solutions to this. The issue has become politically polarized to the point where it's now about sort of the argument, whose argument wins. And to say, when we are our best as a city, we come together as a community, drawing on all the different expertise to come up with a sort of a plan that will work for where we're at right now. And I think so we can do that. And I would call us to sort of come together as a community to work through some of these solutions, because they're there.
Okay. I want to clarify something, just because I'll probably get chirped and criticized for this. Jordan has not faced any questions right now about the legal battle that his organization, Boyle Street Community, I'm not going to put you in a tough spot. Boyle Street Community Services is undergoing right now with a subsidiary company of Daryl Cates, the owner of the Edmonton Oilers, over a $5 million commitment to the Boyle Street's new facility. I know, and you and I have discussed off camera, that you can't comment on this as it is before the courts, but I want it to be acknowledged on this episode and let this audience know that we will have you here back when you're able to talk about this in less of a tough and awkward spot, and we'll dig into that story.
Sure, sounds
okay,
good.
thanks for your availability in advance on that one, Jordan. Tim, last word to you.
Yeah, homelessness is solvable. This is a solvable problem. Edmonton, under the leadership of Homeware Trust, has been among the best in the country at responding to homelessness, and we need to get back to that. But I would ask your listeners, all the Marthas and Henrys, the severely normal Albertans that are listening to this podcast, call your MLA, call your member of parliament, send them a letter saying, look, we need to solve the housing crisis. We need you to do something. Homelessness is a housing problem. It's solvable, but we need you to act.
That's Tim Richter, who's executive director. Let me put your website up here, Tim, so we can pump your tires a little bit. The group does amazing work, the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, and we'll have the link to that in our bio. University of Alberta Chancellor Peggy Garritty joining us here. Dr. Monty Ghosh doing an amazing job as an addiction specialist and an assistant professor at the University of Alberta, and of course the executive director of Boyle Street Community Services, Jordan Reiniger, joining us as well. Thank you to the four of you for taking action on something that is truly a disaster, but something we know that we can address. We really appreciate your availability today here on Real Talk.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan. Really appreciate it.
And to Real Talkers, thank you to you for your informed commentary, for keeping it real in the chat. I know that when this podcast drops, it's going to inspire more conversation and more debate, and we welcome that. Of course, this is just one conversation as part of a bigger discussion that we'll continue to host right here on the show. You have our word on that. talk@ryanjesperson.com is where you can send us your thoughts on this episode and some of the other issues that you're wrestling with, thanks to these Real Talk roundtables. I want to put, before we get to the flamethrower, we have an all Justin Trudeau edition of the flamethrower this Friday for you. Obviously, this week, a lot of attention on this show, and it's brought out some new voices, too. We welcome our new subscribers, and those of you tuning into the show, our exclusive with the Prime Minister on our February 21st episode. If you're one of the few people in Canada that haven't yet watched it, we invite you to do so. So the flamethrower coming up in just a moment, presented by the DQs of Northwest Edmonton in Sherwood Park. But first, I want to tell you about Athabasca University. We're talking about a lot of people right now, I know, that are looking to make a move. Maybe you want to better prepare yourself or position yourself for a promising job market, but you got to level up your knowledge first. You want to get some experience in a post-secondary institution, but there's barriers. The barrier could be cost. The barrier could be your geographical location. You're going, I live way out in the sticks. I can't make it into university. Sounds like Athabasca could be a perfect fit for you. You can learn more about the AU Advantage by checking out their website. That's athabascau.ca. And don't forget, they've got a whole section on the website for student supports, financial options that are available. Athabasca University is Canada's open university. At Eden Landscaping, they're bringing outdoor spaces to life, have been doing so for more than 2 decades. And right around this time of year, we're starting to kind of feel a little bit like spring might be on the way, right? I don't want to jinx us. I don't want to rule out another cold snap. But the reason why you want to get serious about your landscaping project, get in touch with Eden today, is because it puts you right at the front of the queue. So when they go shovels in the ground this spring, your project is right at the top of the list. They've got, as mentioned, experience with ultra-modern designs, more natural designs. They do stonework, water features, outdoor kitchens, retaining walls, excavation, and more. And they're great listeners. I've seen it firsthand. You can find them online at landscapeedmonton.com. Complete Care Restoration is restoring property and rebuilding peace of mind when it comes to Albertans that are experiencing complete nightmares, fires, floods, burst pipes, asbestos, black mold. It's not the type of thing you want to mess around with yourself. Complete Care Restoration was founded on the principle of providing above-the-norm levels of customer service and attention to their clients. They'll treat your property like it's their own. You don't have to wait for disaster either. They just do great builds. They built our studio. We recommend Complete Care Restoration at CompleteCareRestoration.ca. And before we move on, a shout out to all the dog and cat lovers out there. You know that, of course, we're so proud to partner with our friends at Grand Dog Essentials, quality raw food.
Yeah, I had a question today for this, actually, from my partner, Jatinder. So our cat is
I hope I know the answer.
I hope so, too. Our cat is actually having some hair issues, dander and matting. Is there anything that Grand Dog can help us out with?
Okay, so that's a great question. And I'm going to put Jatinder in touch with it. You know what? One of the best parts about, by the way, we didn't rehearse this.
Not at all.
This isn't a bit.
It happened yesterday, so he's having some trouble.
A family-owned business, number one, they approach everything differently. So one of the reasons, like when we do business with Grand Dog Essentials, we were buying their quality raw food way before we were business partners with them, right? And one of the things we loved about it is that our dogs, both of them, have had health issues. Moses has joint issues. His back end's kind of going out on him. It's sad to watch, but they've helped us with supplements and to get him on a custom diet that helps him with that. And then Monroe has had anxiety issues, and so they've helped us with a supplement for that. I guarantee that they've got something,
right?
They've got something to help you out. If you go to granddog.ca and then you go to the Shop Now link, you can check out all their products. They've just introduced a new raw pet food line, a big expansion for the company, which is super duper cool. That's the Complete Canine. It's an Alberta-based raw pet food manufacturer that offers food made in human-grade facilities. They are literally the only raw food manufacturer in Alberta that can make that claim. And then if you're in a boat like Johnny and Jatinder, you want to find a supplement that might work best for your dog or cat, you can find the entire list of options there at granddog.ca, including the 4-leaf rover. That's the brand that we've gone with.
Nice.
And we've seen great results on that. Don't forget the promo code REALTALK knocks 10% off your first-time order delivered to your door in Calgary, Edmonton, and Central Alberta at granddog.ca. Shout out to Tony for $10 in the super chat.
Yeah.
Says Real Talk's just been killing it this week. Says there's a bit for the beer fund. Tony, thank you very much. And then I think it was Scott that hit us up. Scott Kilpatrick hit us up with a $25 contribution on our super chat on YouTube.
Thank you, everybody.
Scotty, thanks for that, man. Really appreciate that.
I do want to give one little shout out to you today. I went on the I was just like, hey, I'll just Google Justin Trudeau, Ryan Jesperson yesterday because, you know, there was a lot of talk around our exclusive with him.
Yeah.
And boom, I just want to give you a big props because I don't know if you saw it. You've been so busy the last few days. But literally all these news sites that we're showing right now.
Oh, wow.
If you go to their homepage, their top stories yesterday, Calgary Herald, Yahoo News, CBC News, The National, National Post, Edmonton Journal, and look at that one, InfoWars.
Alex Jones.
Our buddy, the conspiracy theorist, Alex Jones, even wrote a lengthy blog about our show yesterday. So you can see all the headlines yesterday. I was wishing that print was a lot more popular like it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. Because I would have been able to go to a newsstand yesterday and probably saw your face with Justin Trudeau sitting here in the beautiful studio we built in numerous newspapers. So a big shout out to you. Congrats, buddy.
Well, thanks, dude. And it wouldn't have been possible without your work as well and without this audience. It's obviously been a huge week for the show. An exclusive with the Prime Minister of Canada, a sitting Prime Minister, which is pretty amazing. And we appreciate the audience, the OGs that have been here forever, and the new audience members. We're getting a lot of notes from you signing up on Patreon via the Connect link at ryanjesperson.com, subscribing to our YouTube, following us on Twitter, which has been great, and we sure appreciate that. You can also find Real Talk RJ on Instagram and TikTok as well, which is where Johnny works his magic. We had some fun yesterday with my beer poll, asking who would you rather have a beer with, Trudeau, Poilievre, Singh, or Bernier. And I want to give a shout out to the people that are a little bit choked. We didn't include Elizabeth May on that. She'd obviously be fun fun to get into it with. Some folks were demanding a none of the above option, and then a Jesperson option as well. I said, well, you just need to stop me anywhere in the city. You can have a beer with me. It's easy to have a beer with me. That's the people have embarked on tougher missions than having a beer with Jespo. But you have to read, honestly, the comments. I'm having so much fun with this. I said, I think about 27,000 people chimed in on the Twitter poll. And
crazy.
If you missed it, 60% of respondents said they would most want to have a beer with Justin Trudeau. The poll had been all over the map, and we talked about it yesterday. Poilievre was leading for a while.
But tell them about the cherry on the Sunday that happened yesterday.
The cherry on the Sunday was absolutely hilarious. So, literally, I released the results, and we're having fun with this. There's a lot of people that are, what do you want to call them? Crybabies, butthurt. I don't know what you want to call these people, but the response is so many people upset about this poll result. Who cares?
It's for fun.
It's a joke. Who cares? It's a joke. But I thought it was absolutely amazing. So we released the results yesterday.
And just let me say, yesterday, Ryan could not, we're still working here, right?
Yeah.
And we just couldn't keep up. Email after email. Hey, did you see
It's
you're
been too
here?
much.
Did you see you're here? And then all of a sudden yesterday, boom.
The Prime Minister of Canada retweets my poll results with the note, "Hey, Pierre, hold my beer."
Wow.
Which I thought was one of the coolest things I've ever seen on that shitty app.
And just something I mentioned yesterday, it's really, and we talked about this on the Discourse, shout out to them, who had a great show about how social media and just how it's integrated into politics has changed. Do you think 5-10 years ago that JT's comms team would have tweeted out something like that? It just shows how much the landscape has evolved, how much more organic and just natural it is, where he'll tweet something like, "Hey, Pierre, hold my beer." It's a great time we're living in.
It's not lost on me that's the freaking Prime Minister. It's so funny.
And it also gets me super excited, Ryan. And we know it's probably going to happen, the Trudeau versus Poilievre showdown at the next election, how crazy it is going to be social media-wise and with promo and marketing and how they release things. We were talking about it on the Discourse, even how Danielle Smith with her policies for pronouns and whatnot. The first place she went was social media, so she could release the information and the policies and have it come off in the way she wanted, where before you would have a press conference and people would ask questions. Now it's so much more integrated. It's so much more organic. And me, for one, I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Noob Try Again says whoever runs Trudeau's social media account deserves a raise. I know a lot of you are. Plain Power says Justin Trudeau's on fire. Where has he been for the last 8 years? That was a question. Who was it? It was one of our audience members. I apologize, I don't remember your name, but we read the email to the Prime Minister. The guy basically said, listen, you were all fired up, saying you were pissed off about Bell Media's cuts. Where was that? The audience member said, do that more often. Meet Poilievre where he's at. Be less. We read another one from, I think it was Sylvia or another audience member, that said to the Prime Minister, don't quote Michelle Obama to me. Don't talk to me about they go low, we go high. None of that. They want to see people throwing bombs, throwing punches, getting into it. I don't know. We'll see. Tony says that's definitely a Supriya move on the Prime Minister's. Here's the thing. So Supriya Dwivedi, who we know and love. Obviously, Supriya, the co-host with me of Seriously, which has been on hiatus. Obviously, she's experienced a personal tragedy. But Supriya's back in the mix now. She's just signed on as a senior advisor to the Prime Minister, which is an amazing opportunity for Supriya. It would be impossible for us to respect her anymore. I don't think Supriya is managing Trudeau's social media. I think that she's a little higher up on the chain than that. No offense to social media managers, but I wouldn't be surprised because she's got that cheekiness. Supriya is and she's not, by the way, if you follow her on Twitter, which I recommend, she has not dialed it back one bit.
Not at all.
Did you see the part where she was coming at one of her critics the other day saying, "Hey buddy, don't get mad at me just because you don't know how to make a woman come"? Yeah. I was like, whoa.
Well, if you want to hear real talk, I mean, Supriya is the go-to destination on Twitter, so please follow her. She's just incredible.
Yeah.
But also, big shout out to you. Lots of people texted me, inboxed me, DM'd me, and said, who else but Ryan Jesperson could have got Trudeau back out of his, I don't know what the word is for it, but just getting him to be natural on the show. The last few interviews we've seen with him have been so rigid, so like it's reading off a paper, like he's reading a teleprompter. This was one of the best interviews I've seen of him in the last 3 or 4 years.
Well, I appreciate it, and I think that's a testament to the show and the vibe of the show. Like it's really incredible that he sat here. I know it really pissed off Alberta's premier, who said says the prime minister had like 30 minutes to go sit down with a podcaster, but didn't have time to meet with Alberta's premier. It's remarkable to have the prime minister here for half an hour, no notes, no advanced questions. Despite what some people, this is hilarious. You want to talk about big crybabies? This guy Marty up north, everybody's always putting him on my radar. They say you got to follow this guy. He's like 75,000 followers. Just goes to show that followers do not equal brain cells. But this guy here, look at this. He's so miffed. He's so upset about my stupid beer poll. Look at this guy. He says, this is the caliber of leadership and media in this country. Justin Trudeau is so petty that he paid so-called journalist Ryan Jesperson to run a poll for him. No, just wait. He then launched an army of bots to make sure he came out on top of the poll. And then if that wasn't bad enough, he used the results of the fake poll to reply to Pierre's original tweet. Get this, 2 days later. Don't tell me this is just playful banter. Trudeau is a narcissist who can't handle any criticism. I mean, I'm going to take Marty's tears, put them in an ice tray, and drop it into an old fashioned and just sip on it all weekend long.
It's just you tweeted this out yesterday, so I'm not saying anything you haven't. We were not paid. They did not pay us. We did not pay them. No questions from the show were sent to him in advance.
Never.
No questions from them were sent to us in advance. And at no time did they tell us which direction to go. They simply were fans of the show because he'd been on before. You'd interviewed him several times, and he came in here and he was natural and he was direct. And that's the bottom line.
Shout out to Kimberly, $10 in the super chat. Thanks, Kimberly. We sure appreciate that. Yeah, I had somebody, so I tweeted yesterday, just to be clear. I mean, you guys already know this, or you should know this. Most of you know this. We don't give questions to interviewees, guests on the show ahead of time.
Occasionally they give us some to say, hey, bring this up.
I will say to someone, like in our correspondence before an interview, I'll say to, like, for example, we got Dr. Monty Ghosh in, who's like an internist and an addiction specialist. I'll say to him, hey, Dr. Ghosh, is there anything I might not think of to ask you that you want to make sure we talk about? Because I'm not an expert in that field, so I don't know. Mm-hmm. So there's prep that goes into interviews, sure. But we don't send a list of questions to the Prime Minister's office. You got to be kidding me. And regardless of how you feel about Justin Trudeau, the guy sat here with no notes, no talking points, and took questions that he didn't know. I mean, he's not an idiot. He knows I'm going to ask him about his polling. He knows I'm going to ask about his leadership.
His team
he
keeps
knows
him
I'm going to
well
ask.
prepped.
Well, he's the fucking prime minister. Like, oh, do you think Jesperson might ask about the carbon tax? Do you think he might? Like, yeah. So, someone was saying to me, oh, like, he sure was able to reference the fact that the feds dropped a bunch of money onto Calgary's Ring Road and to the Anthony Henday and the Yellowhead in Edmonton. How would he have had that information at his disposal had he not had the questions ahead of time?
I don't know, because he has 20 people feeding him information every day.
He's a prime minister? He's not like one of your buddies at the neighborhood pub. Like, what are you talking about? I just thought it was so funny, and I just, like, to me, I love it. I mean, the downloads are off the charts. Obviously, this is going to go down as our most downloaded episode in Real Talk history for obvious reasons. And I just love that it's bringing out people that can't handle listening to someone with a different opinion speak openly, candidly, honestly, and challenge them on something. It's like, I mean, I've had people, I'm going to be tweeting about this later because I've been saving some of my favorite feedback, and I'll be like, I'll just like read some of these. I don't have them to show on the screen right now, but some of these comments, you're a clown, Ryan. If you think Trudeau's good for Alberta, you're a complete fool. Move to Ontario with your clown wig and your big red shoes, you traitor. Like, okay, Ryan, you suck and you're a traitor to Canada. You're done in Alberta media. You should be ashamed of yourself. Done in Alberta media is an interesting flex for somebody that just had the prime minister sitting in their studio.
And I think those texts are a good lead into our next segment.
Wouldn't you say, Johnny?
Yes.
I love how this guy rolls. This show wouldn't happen without John Hicks. Make no mistake. Every Friday, it's our last episode of the week. Our friends at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park, that's Palisades, NAMAO, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road, give us a chance to blow off a little steam. We issue the invitation to you to bring the heat. We're looking for your hot takes. We want to hear them. These are all real emails sent to talk@ryanjesperson.com. It's the Flamethrower, presented by the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. This and all Justin Trudeau edition of the Flamethrower. This one from Jake, who says, when the Prime Minister talked about division and anger, Ryan, why the hell didn't you push back on him? He's on video admitting to dividing Canadians to win the 2019 and 2021 elections. His entire reign has been about division and catering to the left. Anyway, I'm sure you needed a shower after that. I know I did. So much bullshit was spewed. That from JR. What about this one from Sam, who says, Jesmo, my family's worked in the oil sands for 3 generations. The oldest one happily retired with an amazing pension and benefits. The middle ones earning high salaries, great benefits, and the youngers earning much less in terms of salary and benefits compared to the older two. Plus, they have to deal with the continual rise of automation in heavy equipment. Justin Trudeau was correct. The industry does not have workers' backs. I've watched Suncor lay off workers while at the same time taking delivery of a $75 million Bombardier private jet. We have been fooled by right-wing politicians. They're not in the business of supporting Alberta workers. That from Sam. What about this from Jennifer, who says, wow, articulate, passionate, nicely surprised. Now invite Pierre Poilievre, who just announced he doesn't want trans women in bathrooms or on sports teams. What's Pierre's climate policy? What's Pierre's replacement for the carbon tax? Seriously, I want to know more. I'm only seeing the batshit crazy stuff about Poilievre. That from Jennifer. We'll tell you, we got an invite in with his team. We're hoping he'll do the show. This from Albert, who says, the reason that Atlantic carve-out, Ryan, you called it a debacle talking to the Prime Minister? Well, that was just because the new fees, are we allowed to say new fees? He said the new fees just switched to the federal carbon plan, and they didn't have any time to affect the changes like heat pumps. This is a tempest in a teapot, Jesperson. Canada's carbon tax is working, and emissions are dropping. Scrapping the tax won't even balance the budget. It definitely won't help lower-income Canadians. It won't help fight climate change, and it would be an overall negative. Now, all that said, what's most frustrating is time and again and again and again, you, Ryan, will not say, so what are you replacing it with? Is that better? Buck up, Ryan, and do your listeners right. That from Albert. What about this one from Catalina, who says, geez, Ryan, after reading the comments on your interview with Justin Trudeau, I thought I'd contribute my 2 cents. People complained you were too easy on him, that you didn't cut him off to insert a counterpoint. The funny thing is I thought the same thing about your interviews with Danielle Smith and David Parker. Now, I've followed your career for years. Thank you, Catalina. Says, I've observed your interviewing style. You ask questions, you give the person a long runway to flesh out their ideas. That's indicative of an inquisitive interviewer who truly wants to hear what the interviewee has to say. So many interviewers these days take on a combative style. The approach is not designed to go deep into conversation. It's ego-driven. It places the spotlight on the question asker, not the answerer. It's designed to inflame and glean sensational sound bites. To the people in your audience who accuse you of being a liberal shill, after the Trudeau spot, I will say we on the left, says Catalina, felt that you were sucking up to Danielle Smith and gave David Parker an undeserved platform. Ryan's not painting pictures, everybody. He's providing the canvas. We were talking about myself in the third person. Goes on to say the person he's interviewing fills the canvas with their policies, beliefs, points of views, and he leaves it up to us to judge the portrait that the interviewee has painted. Ryan trusts this audience to draw its own conclusions about what the interviewee has said. The podcast is not designed to spoon-feed listeners warm and comforting pablum, which many programs in echo chambers do. Ryan, if half your audience is pissed off at any given time, that means you're doing a great fucking job. That from Catalina. Thanks for that. And this one from Dwayne, who says, Jespo, I've been a fan since the 6:30 Ched days, occasionally tuning in to catch up on your new show, but I've had it with the relentless flip-flopping charlatan of your recurring guest, Charles Adler, who seamlessly altered his tune to align with the political zeitgeist. The zenith of my disillusionment came after witnessing his Twitter post in response to your Trudeau interview. What possible grievance could I hold against dear old Grandpa Chuck, you wonder? Your podcast crony delightfully extolled the Prime Minister, praising his intelligence and passion, but I vividly remember Adler years ago portraying Justin Trudeau as an imbecile, as an out-of-touch, passionless, born with a silver spoon, back when he was Jason Kenney's little pug. Now he's perched on his left-wing high horse, disdainfully peering down at conservatives, relishing any chance to disparage Pierre Poilievre. Adler practically penned the current conservative playbook word for word with his old rhetoric. I'm fascinated by this convenient shift in his narrative regarding Ottawa's attacks on Alberta, a discourse he conveniently abandoned when expedient. Old Uncle Chuck fancied shedding his skin, slithering into bed with the left. aiming for mainstream media commentator spots to sip from the liberal media milk and honey cup. You can discern where that endeavor landed. Thank God for Real Talk, says Dwayne. Now, while your listeners, both left-leaning and otherwise, may remain blissfully unaware of this history peddling George Bush's lies that birthed the Iraq War, let's not forget how the conservatives he mocks are the very ones he once championed. Adler talks about this all the time. Back to Dwayne, he says, so Ryan, I don't harbor animosity toward the man, but I discern through his Machiavellian maneuvers, attempting to position himself where the monetary currents flow. Alas, his bid for credibility has crumbled. Everyone's entitled to their opinions and political choices, but when shaping narratives, responsibility is imperative. I can't help but wonder when the next season of skin shedding awaits dear old Uncle Chuck. Jeez,
Shots
that
fired.
from Dwayne. We'll give Charles a chance to respond coming up when he joins us on Monday. The Flamethrower, presented by the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park, are all real emails from you, Real Talkers, to talk@RyanJesperson.com. Coming up on next week's show, we got a whole bunch in store for you, including a sit-down with the fourth candidate for the Alberta NDP leadership. That's right, she hasn't announced it yet, but on Wednesday of next week, you'll find Jody Callahoo Stonehouse right here in the Real Talk studio. In the meantime, have a great weekend and keep it real.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson. Executive producer Josh Dunford. Technical producer John Hick.